we're all in the same boat. We all don't know. Okay, you've been told yours might be a little shorter, which is why you're kind of encouraging you to get some things done. But none of us knows. So all of us should be considering, what do I need to do? There's 3 things to do. All right, welcome to the Zone 1 meeting. All right, so we're gonna begin with Deborah Williams.
So this goes back to one of the Shabbat services where you were talking about how we should serve with joy. And ever since then, I've been worried that sometimes I don't serve with joy. Let me explain what I mean by that. So I had been caregiver for my mom, who has Alzheimer's, and my sister, who is also handicapped. And I was doing that for about 4 years. Last year, we finally placed my mom into a facility where she's being taken care of. I still help my sister with her disability. And sometimes, Rabbi, I don't feel joy, I feel tired. So I was wondering, and then a couple of Sabbaths ago, you were talking about how, I think Lisa asked a question about tolerance and patience. And then Sarah Beth asked how do you tell the difference between when you're tired, I can't remember, it's been a while, but I connected those 2 together and I thought, well, maybe it's not that I'm not serving with joy. Maybe it's that I'm just tired. And I remember how you said that you go on your cruises to recharge. And I'm wondering, well, maybe I just needed to recharge because I want to serve with joy. I want Yahweh to be pleased with what I'm doing. And I know if I'm doing it and I've got this, attitude or resentment or frustration about it, that's not what Yahweh wants.
All right, look, sometimes there's a theme that kind of plays through, or certain themes that play through from the zone meetings. So one of the things I said in one of the meetings today, I think it was in the zone too, is, you need to work on your awareness of you, right? I mean, I've talked about in your personal development and you're changing and transforming into Yeshua, it's got to start with recognizing and observing yourself so that you then, in an objective way, not subjective way, but an objective way, evaluate what needs to change in part of you matching up with him. And so be more hyper aware of yourself. I don't mean like overthinking and like panicky, but just be aware of your state. Okay, this is covered in the Level Up class when we talk about your emotional state, your mental state, okay? I want you to be aware of that state. And then once you're aware of the state, you should be asking questions as to, is there something that's causing that state? Including good states. You happen to be in a joyful state, maybe you want to understand what caused that joy so you can repeat that. So you understand that when you need to feel that way, there's a way to get there, okay? But also in the case where you said that you were getting maybe a little worn out, maybe causing you to have less joy, maybe getting a little snippy or something because you're worn out, it's about recognizing I'm not in a real good state right now, so I recognize that first, and then I should be asking, why? Is it that I'm tired? Is it that something happened that I haven't dealt with and it's just wearing on me because it's in the back of my mind? Because maybe you're still processing some negative thing that happened a few hours earlier, maybe a day earlier. I mean, what's causing it? You have to get really curious about you. What is driving? Because when you contact me for counseling, any of you, Deborah, anybody, I'm going to be thinking in the same mode that I want you to be thinking about yourself. I'm going to be asking questions like, okay, so what do you think was underneath that? In other words, did something happen? Are you just tired? What do you think was underneath that? Yes, I'm glad you recognized I was not in the right mindset. My attitude wasn't right. And then that's a good observation. That's simply an observation without any kind of motive to it or anything else, all right? My attitude wasn't right. Okay, now we want to figure out why. What was the cause of that, all right? Did you have something against the person you were serving? No. Well, were you tired? Yes. Oh, well, maybe that was it. Okay. So once we identify the actual problem, then we ask what the possible solutions are. Now, if you have an issue with the person, it's going to be a lot tougher solution than simply realizing I'm worn out, I'm burnt out, I need a break. And then I will be refreshed and ready to go back at it. And so that's where you then make arrangements for somebody else. In this case, you were doing caregiving. Maybe you can get somebody else to come in, take a shift or two, take a day or two so that you can get a break, and then you can go back and you'll have a better attitude. And recognizing how many days in a row you are able to do these things, or weeks in a row, whatever it is, before you actually need a break. Okay, so monitoring, engaging yourself, okay? I mean, there are times where, I get up right away in the morning and I'll call here and talk to Elder and whatever and find out what's going on as far as, because he gets up first and he's here first. He takes the first shift, all right? But there are also times where I don't even get up until later because I know I need that, okay? I may let myself stay in the bed a little bit longer or just take my time going about my day. I may not stay in the bed, but I kind of take it a lot more slow because I'm still in the recharging type of mode before I go and hit it running. Other times I'm ready to just hit it running. You got to gauge yourself, all right? And then learn, what do I need to do to get myself back to that space? Now, another problem might be, I've never been in that space. What space? The space where I'm joyfully serving and I feel good and I'm really, well then we got to figure out how to get you there. But if you've already been there, then we want to get you back there. But getting you back there has to be understanding you might need a recharge, a refresh, a break of some sort to kind of get that unwind that needs to happen, okay? See, I like to go on cruises, not because, and by the way, for everybody to understand, it's probably, if you do it right, the cheapest vacation you can go on, okay? If you don't pick the biggest boat during the busiest time of year, those are expensive. But if you go in the wintertime, you're not gonna get 90 degrees out in the Caribbean in the winter, okay? I mean, it's been pretty cold on some of the boats I went on, where it's, windy in 70s is windy in 70s on a boat is pretty cold. And it can be even colder than that. But I just wanna be somewhere where I don't need to think about, well, where are we gonna eat? What do you wanna do? Where do you wanna eat? What do you wanna do? I mean, those are the things that ruin my vacation, okay? So people say, why do you like a cruise so much? Because I don't actually do cruise stuff necessarily. I just sit and be left alone. But it avoids, for me, the things that would not be refreshing. The constant, as soon as you wake up, maybe you eat at the hotel at a normal vacation, okay? Or you decide, well, we're gonna go out and eat and get breakfast. Then a lot of the day is all about, well, where are you gonna do lunch? Or what are we gonna do between now and lunch? Then what do you wanna do for dinner? And nobody can agree, and everybody wants different things. And I'm like, Okay, and then you have to drive to and from, and you waste a lot of time trying to just figure all that out, okay? If I'm on a boat, I don't have any of that problem. I walk into a main dining, they're gonna serve me, no problem. I don't have to worry about waiting for whatever. I mean, sometimes there's a line to get seated or whatever, because everybody's sitting at the same time. But I have to wait for all kinds of stuff. And if I go to the buffet, I just walk up and grab food. It's simple, okay? And I can go on a cruise for 4 or 5 days for less than you could just stay in a decent hotel for 4 or 5 days. No meals, no entertainment, just the hotel, okay? Because you go on a cruise for $100 a day, includes everything. Okay, or $150 a day includes everything. Where are you gonna get a decent hotel is gonna cost you $150 a day, at least, okay? I'm talking about medium-end decent hotel. I'm not talking about high-end luxury hotel, right? Because even the cheap hotels are $100 a day to $150, right? For like a Holiday Inn Express or whatever, okay? And so, you're gonna go for 4 days on a cruise for $500. That's less than that, isn't it? And that includes food, entertainment, everything else. But mostly, it's for recharging the batteries, okay? And I don't feel I don't want you to understand, when I go on a cruise, it's a refreshing, not a vacation. I don't do stuff, okay? People go on vacation to do stuff. I just want to be left alone. I've told my wife and the children when we've all gone on the cruise, don't need me for anything. Don't ask me to do anything. You guys do whatever you want. I just want to be left alone. Why? You might say, why? That seems so rude and horrible. Because my whole life is people needing me, pulling on me for stuff all day. So for me, in my observation, that's what I need to refresh. You may be someone whose whole job is sitting in a cubicle by yourself, or something is all by yourself, and you need people. So your vacation is going to be a lot more out there with people doing a bunch of stuff, because that's refreshing to you, because you spend a lot of time by yourself, okay? So I'm just saying is, what you have to figure out what works for you, okay? You got to figure out what works for you. Now, and by the way, let me say this to spouses. If you go on a vacation, you got to really make sure that everybody's getting what they need. Find out, because what you think refreshes you and is good for you may not be what your spouse thinks works for them. My wife and I are very opposite on some of that stuff. She likes to go out and see everything and do every activity possible, and I don't. But I will do some of them to please her, and she'll leave me alone to please me. Okay? There's a balance. You know, understand what I'm saying? There's a balance. Okay? So for you, Deborah, if in your caregiving, I want you to do a very objective, honest, zoomed out look at yourself and say, would I have a different attitude if I just got some rest from it, if I took a break from it? And if the answer is yes, then that's what you need. If you maybe discover you have some underlying issues with the person that you're serving, then maybe those need to be dealt with, okay? But it takes you, this is an incredibly important skill set. All of you pay attention, okay, in this walk. Because some of you are thinking, what are we talking about Shabbat? Because in this walk, you must be able to zoom out and watch and observe yourself objectively. Because if you walk around thinking everybody else is wrong and you're right and this and that and everything else, and you can't see that your own poop stinks. Yes, I said that. Are rabbis allowed to say that? Okay. So, you know how much I care about that. But you know what I'm saying? This is where that plank twig thing happens. All right? You can't have a plank twig problem if you're able to zoom out and look at yourself objectively, unfiltered, and just say, oh, look, I'm being a jerk right now. Okay? You should be able to say that and realize, oh my gosh, I'm really being a jerk. And then you have to then say, so what do I need to do to fix that? Okay? And do I need to apologize to anybody? Do I need to own it in some way? But you can't get out there subjectively blaming everybody, pointing the finger out there without looking at this. You got to look at this. I know all of you want to think and say, yeah, that's Rabbi, that's what we blame you for everything. No, I'm saying is look at yourself. Okay, you have to look at yourself. And you have to do it honestly. So I'm telling you, this is a valuable, on the highest order skill set to have, is to be able to see yourself unfiltered. No lenses, no filters, no delusion, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what really is there, right? Which also, by the way, for some of you that really struggle with self-esteem and other things, you got to be able to receive and see yourself open and honestly about the good. Because some of you really struggle to receive compliments or think that there is anything good about you, that you have any value. Well, are you really being objective? Because some of you I've tried to give compliments to and you can't receive. Or you'll tell me that you've had that problem in your life from other people you just can't receive. And that is not humility. That is, low self-esteem, low self-worth. It's some other problem, okay? Insecurity. But I need you to get to the place where you can look at things objectively, specifically you. You try to do that, you think, with other people, which is hard to do too, because you're very subjective when you look at other people too, which is why he tells you judge not. Because judging comes from that subjective judgment that we do when we look at everybody and everything that's happening. And I don't want you judging you either. Some of you come down slow, slam hard down on yourselves. No, be objective. Okay? Am I in the wrong right now? Yes, you are. Okay, well then I need to do something about it. I need to own it. Maybe I need to own it with somebody else. Okay, I need to look at that. All right? And Deborah, in your case, if you feel like, you know what, my attitude's been pretty off in terms of serving some people I care greatly about that really have needs, well, let me figure out why that is. And if it's something as simple as overworked, or exhausted, burned out, or something, whatever word you use for that, then figure out a way to get a break, and then figure out how much break you need, and then test maybe how frequently you need it. Also, see if you can go back and recognize at what point it changed, so that you can kind of get a sense of, the symptoms or the signs that your attitude is starting to shift so that you can handle it sooner, okay? I'll keep looking down here because that's where my little iPad is, all right? So, do you understand what I'm saying? So, when you recognize that you've gone off the rails a little bit, did it happen like that, or did it slowly ease into it? And if you can catch it earlier, wouldn't that be great, right? So you can start to recognize signs that you're getting burned out, signs that your attitude's going off the rail, signs, you understand what I'm saying? Okay? Anyway, did that help you, Deborah?
That helped a lot. And I think part of it was the burnout, and the other part that you mentioned that it might be, I may just need to call in for some one-on-one counsel with that part.
Okay, and we can do that. Okay, and again, if you call in for counsel, what I'm going to do is help you dig underneath to figure out what's really going on. That's all I do, okay? All right, good. And by the way, that's really what you're gonna wanna look for in a counselor if you're gonna counsel with anybody professional out there. I think you should be looking for somebody that can have a gift or talent to know when whatever you're saying is the problem is really not yet the problem. I don't know if it's something that's just a gift or a talent. Okay, but when people will tell me, well, I got this problem with this, and I'll be like, okay, and then tell me more about it, and then when I hear it, I'm like, no, there's something under that. And then they dig, and then I'm like, well, no, it's still not there yet, right? And it's just the ability to recognize when we're kind of not really at the core of the problem. Even if I don't necessarily understand what the core of the problem is, although I usually am pretty good at guessing, but the thing is, you want somebody that's not just gonna take what you think the problem is and treat what you think the problem is, without confirming for themselves that it is the problem, all right? Okay, it'd be like you going to the doctor saying, doctor, I have this problem, and the doctor's just gonna treat you for it without doing their own test to see whether or not that really is your problem.
So, Rabbi, I can get bored on Shabbat. What other games or activities other than the Parsha Pearls can I do to help keep my focus?
Just mess with your dad. You know.
Grandpa?
Grandpa.
You mean Grandpa?
Okay, I'm sorry. Give Grandpa some grief, you know, mess with him. You know, pull on his beard, you know, stick some peanut butter in there or something sticky, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding. Some honey or something, you know. All right.
Yeah.
I'm teasing. Okay, look, obviously the Parsha Pearls is a great thing to do, but that's not necessarily gonna occupy all your time, okay? How old are you, Gabriel?
I'm 11 years old. I'm about to turn 12 this summer.
Fantastic. All right, fantastic. So when you turn 13, you'll be able to go into the Torah teens class. So you're getting closer to that. So that'll give you something to also do.
I'm definitely going to do that when I turn that age.
Yep. So that'll be something you can do at 13. Okay, so that'll be good. And then as far as the other activities that you can do, you know, Justin, one of the things you can do with him that could be fun is go get some Bible movies that he could watch and then review with him to see how many things he catches and what things he catches that are wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, that could be a fun game because it gives him something to do watching the movie, right? And then you can sit there with him and watch it and then compare notes to see how many things you guys caught that were wrong with the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that takes some patience, as you know. You sit there and go, well, that's wrong, and that's wrong.
Well, but remember, this is not about getting mad at what's wrong. It's a game of identifying it, right? And to see if you guys catch everything and see if either one of you caught something the other one didn't catch. Gabriel, does that sound like fun?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, I mean, this way you get to watch a movie, it's biblically related, and it has a purpose of growing in terms of you looking at the thing from the point of view of, I wonder what's wrong here. And you can get any of the animated Bible movies as well as the regular ones, whatever you think is appropriate for him, but it's all about, does he know what it actually says in the scripture versus what they're putting out on the video, and that would be a fun little exercise to do, okay?
Okay.
Because I told you, I said this the other day, I did this with the Gadol class at a feast one year, at a Passover. I played Exodus, Gods and Kings, which is a terrible movie. As far as biblically accurate, actually I think it was a pretty terrible movie in general. It's just a badly made movie. But the point was to catch all the mistakes, and I had my own list. that I made prior, because I watched it prior to having them do it. And then when they watched it, I didn't sit there while they watched it. I had things to do, but I came back after it was over and I said, okay, let's talk about the things you caught. And I had my list. You know, those guys caught everything I caught. They did a great job, okay? So I was really proud of them, you know, because they were able to identify, well, that didn't happen in Scripture, and that's not the way that happened, and that's not the way this is. So this is really a fun exercise. That's one of the things that you can do, okay? That's one of the things you can do.
Perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Question answered for you?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Now you, Justin,
Right.
you got something?
So, I got a couple for you. So Exodus chapter 12, verse 23, a couple Torah portions ago. It talks about Yahweh passing over and not allowing the destroyer to come in. And I also noticed Psalm 17, verse 4, David talks about the destroyer. And also in 1 Corinthians 10:10, it talks about the destroyer. Could you explain who the destroyer is, or is that kind of a fleshly and an earthly type thing compared to a heavenly and an above?
Look, this is, you know, when we're talking about it from an Exodus point of view, which is also being quoted in these other places, okay, is the, you know, the plague of the killing of the firstborn, right? This is the 10th plague. And the destroyer is simply whatever it was that Yah sent that then would do these things, whatever that is. It's kind of like trying to identify the Ruach. It's a thing that we can't put our hands on and really get a full grasp of. I refer to it as the means by which. Okay, so this was the means by which the firstborns were destroyed. Okay? Okay. So it's not like it's a being or something like that. It's something that's, again, above us in that way. It's just how he did it. Okay?
Okay, sure. Well, and that just made me wonder because, like I said, in Psalms and Corinthians, in Psalms, it kind of talks about taking the path that leads you to the destroyer, and then there's the path of, you know, Elohim, so life and death. And so I wasn't sure if that was kind of a metaphor of, you know, those things.
It is. It's all talking about basically what leads you in terms of success and reward, or leads you into, you know, destruction and things going badly, okay?
Okay. Perfect.
And so when you act, we'll call it arrogantly, like it says in Deuteronomy 17, when you take it upon yourself to do things your way instead of his way, etc., you're inviting destruction into your life, okay? When you don't listen to the above, you're inviting destructive things to happen in your life. That doesn't mean every time something goes bad in your life, you need to think, uh-oh, what did I do? Time and chance happens also. But when you do those kind of things, you are inviting that into your life, okay? Which also means it may not happen immediately either. It's just you are inviting those things into your life, okay?
Yeah, okay, perfect.
All right, anything else?
And then one more, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so one of just the previous portions in Exodus chapter 12, you know, we learned about the Passover and them being circumcised, can't eat of the Passover unless you're circumcised. And then they go into the wilderness. And so my question is actually in Joshua chapter 5, verse 6.
Where it talks about how they weren't circumcised?
Yeah, and so none of the generation that left Mitzrayim were, but the generation that were born in the wilderness were never circumcised until they crossed the Jordan and entered the land, and then they did the Passover. So it says that they don't get to enter because let's say did they not get in the land only because they didn't keep that covenant?
No. Look, there's almost no detail given on this. Okay, but we can then extrapolate to some degree, right? We can extrapolate out as part of their punishment for not going in the land like they were supposed to, right? That they now had to wander and wait out 40 years so the generation would die out. It seems like that they were then also not doing some of these covenantal things because they had not earned that designation. They were going through this process of being purged out of the ones who rejected. And so now when they
Okay.
finally get to the land, it's like, now we need to make sure everybody's circumcised because now we're going into the land where all of these things need to happen.
Okay, that helps because I read that that they were consumed because they did not obey the voice of Yahweh, and so that's why and it's talking about the circumcision, right?
Right.
So,
But they remember they were put in the wilderness so that generation, regardless of circumcision or not, was not going into the land. Okay.
sure.
And so,
Okay.
so my guess might be that they weren't doing Passover in the wilderness. Okay, that's a
Yeah.
possibility because this was part of, that's not for you guys while you're out here in the wilderness. Okay, that's gonna kick in when you guys show yourselves worthy of covenant and we get to the land and go back in there. It doesn't say any of this. We don't know,
Okay.
right? But this
All right.
this is a reasonable speculation. To say.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I just read that obviously the children born in the wilderness weren't circumcised during that time. And I thought, maybe that had to do a little bit with them not wanting to circumcise the flesh, circumcise off the stuff from Mitzrayim, cut it away.
Yeah, no, I don't know that it was any of that. I mean, there's no evidence of them. Now there is a Passover talked about when it then talks about the second Passover when we get to the book of Numbers, I believe. So we do have them going through some of this, but we don't know at what point things may have gone sideways and derailed and whatever happened with that. Okay, they may have done Passover all the way through. It doesn't say. These are those verses that make you go, I wonder.
Things that make you go, hum.
All right, there are things that make you go, All right, I don't know. So you scratch your head and you go, I don't get it. And we're left guessing, okay? We're left guessing. All right, that's the best I can give you for that.
No, that works. And last but not least, obviously we got the blue memo too.
Yeah.
And for you and Greg, there you go. Okay.
I got blue here.
You're not gonna catch me. Okay, so,
I know I won't.
so, and by the way, tell Gabriel that his boredom has caused his hair to grow funny.
Yeah, straight up, huh?
Yeah, you gotta get him less bored. It's doing weird things to his hair.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you, Rabbi. We appreciate it, and good to see you all. And Shabbat Shalom.
All right, Shabbat Shalom.
I have more questions than I think you'll want to answer today, but
No
the
way.
first one I have.
I know you, that's surprising.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it was, I'm not sure, it was a few months ago there during Zone 2. You talked about euthanasia, and I guess I was really surprised by your answer. To me, it sounds like giving up. But
I thought you were talking
my
about young
wife-
people in Asia. So
no,
youth in Asia. Okay, I'm sorry.
it might have been.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And especially during a Zone 2. Yeah.
Well, Zone 3, really. We'd have more youth in Asia there. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. But my wife and I want to have a living will that says, not to unhook us from life support and all of that stuff. I mean, is that okay? I mean,
sure. Look,
Okay.
what we're talking about, the idea of offing yourself in some way is different than you having no quality of life, you're being kept alive by machinery and saying, I don't want that, all right? Okay, so that's your saying, I don't expect to have enough of a quality of life. It's just gonna be horribly forced existence. I'd rather you not do that. Just let me continue down. Because obviously at that point you are essentially dying and the machines are keeping that from happening, okay?
Right.
Or your body is reasonably fine, but the brain has had something massive happen to it so that it's not functioning. Okay, maybe you had some sort of a stroke or something, but the body could be kept alive. Well, what's the point? Okay, so having a living will is simply your expression of saying, if I get to that place, I don't want to exist like that. Just let it play out naturally. So that's not you doing anything to cause it death faster. It's simply saying, I don't want you to interfere with allowing it to play out. So it's absolutely appropriate, okay? I'm not saying people have to do it, but certainly nothing wrong with people doing that.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think our concern is more the other way, that they won't keep us alive when there's a chance that, we could at some point have a reasonably productive life, after an accident.
My understanding of this, okay, because both my parents had put that in their papers, right? They had these documents, is that you're supposed to give somebody the authority to make that call, okay? So it's about how much do you trust that person to make the call you want made, all right? Okay. And so that's the deal. Is the person, two things. Number one, is the person strong enough to let them pull the plug? Because it takes a lot of strength to say, yeah, unplug, that's not worth, that's what my father didn't want that, right? It's also, are they strong enough to say, you know what, I think there really is hope that this could be something. And it's being objective. Do you have somebody that you trust to be objective enough to not let their emotions either prevent them from pulling it or pulling it too soon, right? Or having them, or their emotions making them pull it too quickly, okay? So it's all about who you pick. Because as I understand it, it's not like those documents automatically go to the hospital knows what to do. Somebody has to walk in the hospital and saying, this is a document that my father has, I have the right to make this decision, they want the plug pulled, okay? So my brothers and I are all aware of the document that my mother has in place, my father had it in place also, and we know which one of us is the one that was given in the documents. Not me, it was my brother, he's a doctor, my mother thought he would be the better one. I don't think he has the emotional capacity to pull the plug, but that's because he's a mama's boy or whatever, but he's a doctor, okay? So she gave him that authority. But I know, and so does my other brother know, that her desire would be not to be kept alive just on a machine, okay? So as long as you have the people that you're leaving behind aware of your desire, and you just have that discussion, say, look, if there's any kind of reasonable chance that there could be enough of a recovery to have some quality of life, then please leave me on the machines until that could happen. If the doctors are saying, look, you're just gonna be keeping them alive with machinery, then there's no point to that, okay? Right, there's no point to that. All right, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, that does answer my question. And of course, like if you're in an accident or something, you're probably gonna, whoever you give that authority to is probably gonna have a very emotional response anyway. So
no matter what,
there's no way you can
whether it's an accident or not, you're giving a family member that authority. It's gonna be emotional, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Telling somebody to allow your loved one, parent, or whoever it is to die is brutal, it's hard, okay? Look, my mother-in-law had a massive stroke. They put her in hospice as she was kind of dwindling away, and they told my wife and her siblings, we're just gonna stop feeding her and everything else, and we just let them kind of go. That's the recommended thing to do at that point because she's never gonna have brain function. It was a massive hemorrhage, okay? We can keep her breathing, we can keep the body moving, as far as the functioning and alive, but there's nothing ever gonna be happening in the brain, okay? There's no awareness that's gonna be there. And so they had to make the decision to allow her to pass, all right?
Right.
So it shouldn't be ever an easy decision, okay? It should be easy to know what to do, it's just still not easy to do it. Okay? By the reason I say it's easy to know what to do, meaning the person, especially if they left a living will, which says, this is what I want you to do, that should be easy enough to know what to do. But to actually implement it and pull that plug or allow it to be, in this case, she wasn't on a machine, but they were just gonna, take the IV out that was feeding her, or whatever it is, and just allow her to pass, that was hard to do. Okay? But it's the choice, right? All right, go ahead.
Right. Well, the other thing I was going to add about this is that, I know people who were given, 6 weeks to live, who had cancer. They and that was, supposedly with chemo and radiation and everything. But, 8 months later, they went home and they did nothing and they were still alive. So it's really hard to know in a situation, like that, what is the right thing? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, but there's a difference between, there's a difference between somebody whose brain functions there and they're aware, they just have a terminal disease. And people can live longer or shorter. I watch these commercials all the time, for wounded warriors and all these other things, people that had problems from a military point of view. And there's one that I always remember where the lady's talking about her husband getting diagnosed with some sort of stage, whatever, cancer, and scheduling him for treatment, but he died the next day. Meanwhile, it sounded like they thought he could come in for treatment and all these other things, and he didn't even make it to the next day. And other people are diagnosed with stage whatever, and they last years. Okay?
Right.
And so there is no telling, but see, we're talking about a person that can still function on some level versus somebody with a massive brain hemorrhage who will never get any function back. They're not actually consciously aware in any level and deciding to keep that body alive, okay? That's a different thing. That's a different thing.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. That does make sense to me. Okay. Okay.
But that's why they usually word it as, I don't want to be kept alive by machines. Okay?
Right.
So saying that I have 6 weeks to live, but I can still eat and this and that and everything. I don't need machines to keep me alive, then I'll live as long as I live. That's fine. I may live 6 weeks, I might live less, I might live more. But when I'm only being kept alive by outside forces making me stay alive, keeping me alive, that I can't keep myself alive, that's a whole different place. Okay?
Right.
All right.
Right. I see that there's really no comparison. When you're in control of your faculties, it's very different. Even if you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness is much different than saying having a brain injury or something go wrong where essentially your brain stops functioning.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
Essentially it's exactly like you said, the machines are keeping your body alive, but your brain has already died. So they're very different, very, very different.
But everything's up to the person.
Okay.
Look, you have to decide what level of living you would like to be left alone and kept at or, help to maintain, and what level of living you're like, just let me go. That's personal preference. Okay, again, it's not committing suicide, it's not this, it's not that. It's just saying, look, as this decline is happening, I'd rather just let it just play out, or I'd rather just do everything you can to keep me going, whichever, it's your preference, right? Okay?
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, well, my second question is what does it mean to do something with your life?
What does it mean to do something with your life? Okay.
Right.
I'm glad you ask easy questions.
Okay.
And by the way, I really wish you wouldn't just ask questions that only affect you. No. Because this is a question everybody asks. I'm just teasing, okay? This is a struggle we all struggle with. What does it mean to do something with my life, right? Okay? Mm-hmm. I would go to something like the parable of the talents that says, okay, he's given you a few things. Number one, he's given you life. So you're alive. And then you want to think about, what am I doing with this time frame between birth and death to be productive in some way? To A, grow, and B, be a blessing to others. And you can do that in unlimited varied types of ways. The variations of ways you can do that are literally unlimited, okay? I teach Torah is one of the ways I do that. You know what? But when I have my water pipe break like it did the other day, having Harold as a plumber helped and was a blessing. So, it could be anything, right? If you need someone just to sit and listen because you're going through something, the person that's your friend of yours that's willing to sit and listen is a blessing. So you want to think about, what do I want to do with my life? Well, I think that we should, A, be growing as we transform into his image. So we want to grow, leveling up everything we can, okay? And B, do things that bless other people. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, don't know whether I should put this into context, but, well, maybe I should. I went to the doctor, and she tells me, anything that I wanted to do in my life, I've already done. But anyway, then, my father's ringing the phone off the hook. And so finally I answered because I thought, well, maybe something's wrong. So I talked to him, and he says to me, you need to move to Pennsylvania, get a job, buy a house, and buy a Suburban, and do something with your life. And
listen, buying a Suburban would be on my list of things you must do.
Right.
It seems
Yeah,
odd
sure.
to throw that in there. All right, go ahead.
And really, I don't know if any of those things are, how can I put it? Well, they certainly aren't on my short list, let me put it that way, of things I want to accomplish in my life. Okay.
Then you don't need to worry about them. Look, if you are one of those people, and in some ways this can be a blessing, obviously it's not ideal, to find out that maybe time's running out, okay? But that could also be a blessing to focus a little bit on what do you want to do and what time you have, okay? And that means that you should not be influenced by anybody, but you should be interested in people's thoughts, counsel. So you got your father gave you some ideas. That doesn't mean you need to do what he said, but it's something you go, Then you go, wait a minute, none of that stuff's really on my short list. Then it's not stuff you need to be doing, okay?
Okay.
Because all of us need to understand that whether you're in Al's situation where he's been told, listen, if there's things you want to do, you better get them done, as opposed to, and by the way, Al will keep you in prayer. But the thing is, none of us knows what time we have anyway, okay? I mean, you could be here right now listening to somebody, Al didn't say this. Let's say somebody's on here saying that he's that person with 6 weeks to live. Like we talked about that example where someone has 6 weeks to live, and you may be thinking, oh my gosh, and you know what? You might not live 6 weeks. They may outlive you. So let it all be a lesson to all of us. Be maximizing your time, okay? Time is that one commodity we don't get any more of. You can get more money, you can get more things, you can get more all kinds of, but you can get more health sometimes, right? You can improve things. You cannot get more time. Once it's gone, it's gone. You don't get more, okay? Unless you're Hezekiah, he got more, okay? But most people don't get more, all right? So, so for you, Al, look, we're all in the same boat, okay? We all don't know, okay? You've been told yours might be a little shorter, which is why that's kind of encouraging you to get some things done. But none of us knows, so all of us should be considering, what do I need to do? There's 3 things to do, okay? 3 things, really. One is you want to be a blessing where you can. 2 is you want to be making sure that you're transforming by leveling everything up into him the best you can. And the last thing is, what are you leaving behind? Okay? Are you preparing for those who you're leaving behind? Have you left them any kind of a legacy, even if it's just words of wisdom? I'm not saying you have to leave them a financial legacy. What are you leaving behind? Okay? Because that's, what kind of mark did you make? I don't mean mark like you had to be some famous person. I mean, did you make you might have, let's say you changed one child's life of yours because you have a bunch of children. What if you really did something that changed their life in a positive way? What if you impacted somebody that was a friend of yours, something you said or something you did for them changed everything, all right? What kind of an impact did you leave, okay? Maybe you were that willing ear to listen to the person that when nobody else would listen to them. And that day that they need, that maybe you saved them from all kinds of bad choices and decisions, all right? So those are the 3 things I would be thinking about. And of course, end of life stuff, all of us should be lining up getting our ducks in a row, so to speak, so that if something happens, because it's going to happen at some point, even if it's at 150, but it's gonna happen at some point, and when it does, do you have things lined up so that the people you leave behind are minimally train wrecked by your leaving? They should only be sad, not train wrecked, okay? Your leaving should only make them heartbroken. But you shouldn't be leaving them a mess, okay? You don't have to leave them a bunch, just don't leave them a problem, okay? So don't feel like, well, I don't have anything to leave my kids, like a blessing, money, or this or that. That's okay, just don't leave them a problem. Don't leave them a bunch of bills and debts and confusion. Don't leave them no way to know how to access your insurance or please have insurance, and how to access your insurance or how to access your bank accounts. My father did a great job starting when he was probably in his 60s, all right? And he died in his 80s. So, he did a great job of taking a spreadsheet and putting every one of his accounts, passwords, bank account numbers, insurance policies, and access to names of the companies and phone numbers and everything on a sheet and gave it to each of his children. Okay, all three of us have, well, we don't have it now, he's passed and all that stuff's been handled, but we had all that. And my mother had that, so that when he passed, it was minimally challenging to get all those things handled, okay? And so you need to do those kind of things. That is out of love. Make sure that people know, especially your spouse, okay? And if you and your spouse happen to have something happen to both of you at the same time, then you ought to make sure your children have that as well, but especially your spouse. If you've got stuff in the safe, they better know how to open that safe, okay? If you got something in a lockbox, they need to have that access. If you got something where, bank accounts and everything else that need passwords to get into and all kinds of logins, they ought to have that sheet that knows how to log in. Good luck with my stuff. I can't even log into my stuff. My wife's totally out of luck with that. Okay, maybe it'll work better for her, because it certainly doesn't work for me. Okay, just hit forgot password and start all over again. But the point is, you want to do those things as best you can. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, they have a lot of things doctors like to tell me, but I don't know if it is, they never gave me a time frame, and there's no guarantees in life anyway. I don't know that it really affects anything. It's just, I guess, the last few days I was thinking about this a lot. I got a new job, and, I'm asking myself, I wonder, what am I really doing with my life, type of thing. And so that's really where this kind of stems from. But, like I said, I mean, the biggest thing they tell me is not to drink alcohol. They say that it's my mind that's keeping me alive, and that, alcohol is going to shut that off. And so, I'm used to getting the 45-minute speech about no alcohol, no recreational drugs, and that type of thing. But, I don't do either, so it's really not a problem. But like I said, I don't know that it's as bad as they make it,
Okay, but Al, here's the thing. Here's the thing, okay? You have something that we're all gonna at some point figure out, is some idea that you may have less time than maybe you thought. You may, right? And because you know this, you can ask the questions you've been asking, which is, what am I doing with what time I have? Not knowing how much time there is, even if they gave you a time frame, okay? Okay, I had a friend that lived in my neighborhood when I was growing up, whose sister had a liver transplant back in the 70s, okay? When that was a kind of new thing. And people generally didn't live very long after that, okay? So she was a teenager. She passed away either last year or the year before. I think it was last year, just a few months ago. She passed away, and she's older than me. She had to be around 70, okay? In her 70s. And so they didn't expect her to live that long, okay?
Right.
And so they were happy if she would have made it to like 30, okay? And so she made it way longer than they expected. And she ended up married, and she ended up with all these other things that she got to do in her life, But otherwise...
Right, absolutely.
Okay, but so with you may have more or less. All of us may have more or less. It doesn't matter. I mean, just because I tell you 150 doesn't mean it won't be 200. So, okay. But but you understand, we don't know. But you know what? Even if I knew it was 150, I still want to act like it's only going to be another short little thing because I don't want to waste, okay? And we waste so much time, you know. You better make sure to spend that, make sure the people that you love know that you love them and love on them.
Right, absolutely.
Okay? And part of loving on them is working as long as you still can work because that's providing for, you know, for Jeannie and the rest of them, okay? And so, you know, do what you can, okay? And so when you say, I don't know what I'm doing in my life, I'm still doing the man thing. I'm trying to provide for my children and my wife, and I'm still trying to grow. And while I'm doing things, I'm gonna try not to get upset about dumb things and waste time on dumb things. Look, I just did a funeral, well, I went to a funeral. And when I went to the funeral recently, and I got to speak a little bit at it as well, but the thing is, when I was at the funeral, one of the things I always say is, let this be a reminder of just how fragile life can be, because nobody was expecting this particular person to pass at the age that he did. Okay, he was very young, relatively speaking, okay? Certainly younger than me by a good amount, right? So, but these things do happen. And so we take for granted that we just have forever. Especially when you're a kid, you don't ever think about mortality. When you get a little bit older, you start thinking about it because you realize, wow, you know, I try to imagine things like when I think about my mother being as old as she is, I'm thinking she's got to know it can't go on forever. Like she's getting closer. How do you deal with that emotionally, knowing that you're getting that much closer? And I think part of it is that you start to have peace that you're kind of getting close to ready to be done with it all. And that's, you know, as it plays out, and you have that peace about letting it play out. But the thing is, however that plays out, you just don't know, okay? And I really want to emphasize that we have to prepare, all of us, to be motivated by mortality. I mean, I've talked about that as a teaching idea. I've never really done a teaching called that, but it's just the idea that we should be inspired knowing that we only have an unknown amount of time, which means that if you have an unknown amount of time, wasting any of it is foolish. And Abba tells us not to be foolish, okay? As a matter of fact, one of the things he says, be wise, redeeming the time, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Al? 'Cause I gotta.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about, questions about fear. And, really the question is, I don't know if it's really maybe not about fear, but is there an emotion that makes you hyper aware? I guess it's really the question.
Hyper aware of what?
Everything around you.
I think there are emotions that would make us have our senses be more on alert, so to speak, which would increase our awareness of everything. Fear does that, okay, to some degree, where if you get into the fight flight mode where you become maybe more aware and thinking danger might be out there, something might be going on. So I do want you to be hyper aware in a good way, so that you're just kind of paying attention to yourself. But I don't want you to be doing it out of a negative emotional space where there's worry or fear or panic or something like imminent threat of something happening, that has you at this, high level of sensitivity in terms of your senses, right? You're much more aware of sounds and lights and things and what's happening and what you're watching and how you're feeling and what everybody else is doing, because then you get into this sort of paranoid place, okay? So you don't want to do that.
I wouldn't say with me that it's really a paranoid place, No,
I'm saying that's ultimately if it goes far enough. Okay. It can go there if unchecked, because now we're just almost at a constant I wonder what that is. I wonder what this is. I wonder what, But I still want you to be aware. Right. Okay. I think most of us walk through life half asleep, so being aware is a good thing.
Right. Well, I guess, I mean. For me, it's always, maybe not always, but the first time it happened is when I was really put to the test. I was 13, 14, and my father wasn't around, and the guy who my grandfather hired to bale this hay quit because he said the hill was too steep and, you're going to kill yourself. He was going to kill himself trying to bale that hay. And I went and did it. And when I was going up the hill at one point, I had the wheels of the tractor were way off the ground. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to roll it over backwards. And in fact, I slid back in the seat and I couldn't even see the tops of the trees at the top of the hill. And, I felt fear, of course. And I think fear in those situations is natural, but, I wonder if it's a good thing. But also, I realized, the tractor made sounds that I never noticed before, and it was doing things that I never noticed before. And I realized, wow, I'm seeing all this for the first time. And I guess my point is that okay? Is that normal? I mean,
No, it is normal. Because again, when you're awake, you're more aware of everything. And what happened was the fear woke you up. Okay, you were kind of just doing what you were doing, but you weren't fully awake and in the moment, aware of everything. So your awareness had been diminished because you were just focused on mowing, baling the hay. So you were just doing the hay with the tractor instead of also being aware of the sounds of the machine. This happens to when we drive, right? I say that when we learn how to drive, we're much more hyper aware of everything. We're supposed to look at the mirrors, we're supposed to be this, we're looking at that. And at some point we're just driving, and then next thing you know, we're like, realize you're about to turn into a lane and you didn't realize, there was a truck there. And you're like, whoa, wow, I almost got hit. Because your awareness level had gotten diminished because you just got comfortable in just doing what you were doing. So you're kind of partially asleep. You're not that you were sleeping, but you're just not paying attention. Because your attention was limited to this thing that you were comfortable doing, and you're probably on the phone or listening to something on your devices that you listen to when you're in your car. I was gonna say listen to the radio, nobody does that anymore. But you listen to something on your car, okay? And so those things create a potential level of diminished awareness, okay? Fear heightens all of that up. So now all of a sudden you're hearing everything, okay? So yeah.
But in those situations, is fear a good thing, or is fear always a negative emotion?
Well, fear is, okay, let's change it from fear to awareness of a concern that something may go badly. Okay, so I don't think you should ever be afraid, but you should have a heightened level of concern. That sounds not good. The wheels coming up is not good. I should be concerned this could go badly. Okay?
Right.
Fear is gonna make it harder for you to actually make a decision to do something, even though you now have a heightened awareness, but fear is gonna really make it harder to pull the trigger on doing something. Do I turn the wheel? Do I do this? Do I hit the brakes? Whatever it is. Concern though, yes, you should definitely be concerned that I'm now aware something could go wrong, okay?
Right.
But no, fear is never the thing to do, okay? I will behave differently though if I have a heightened concern of danger, of something going badly, okay?
Right, absolutely. Okay, that makes total sense. I'm really sorry. I did not understand this until now.
I understand.
So my question comes from the Zone 3 meeting from last night.
Okay, those things are secret because people who weren't there, we don't, what happens in Zone 3 stays in Zone 3. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You know what? You just reminded me. I wrote some stuff down from the zone meetings that I wanted to bring up today, and I left it home. And I don't remember what it was. So go ahead.
So it was when you were talking to Janelle about the forgiveness teaching. Mm-hmm. She had mentioned about how to recognize when you have fully forgiven something. And my question comes from recognizing when you do forgive something, but going into trusting into a new situation, or even just struggling to open up to new people from a past situation that you've experienced. So my question is can you truly forgive if you're still struggling to trust in a new set of situations?
Okay. You're dealing
Does that
with...
make sense? I'm not sure if I'm wording that right.
No, I understand what you're saying. So you're dealing with two completely separate things that do end up getting connected. And they're separate meaning that forgiveness is letting go of the emotional, the negative emotional connection to the event that happened. Okay? Something happened, you still remember the thing that happened, but if you've forgiven, it no longer affects you in a negative emotion. It doesn't upset you, it doesn't make you afraid, it doesn't cause you pain. You've released all that, okay? Now, that being said though, a peripheral effect of a traumatic experience is that, especially if it's with people, okay, or maybe even situations, is that when you're in the similar situation or with interacting with people, you may have a trust problem, trusting that the thing might not happen again. So it doesn't mean you didn't forgive. It means that now you don't feel safe that every situation isn't going to fall apart into the same way the other one did. Or the same thing might not happen again if it's something you were trying to do and the thing didn't go right, okay? Because it could be situational or it could be relational, okay? You know, I tried to do this thing, had nothing to do with a relationship, and it blew up in my face, and now I'm going to be not trusting doing this thing again, okay? Okay, or I had somebody do something for me and it went badly and I'm not going to trust having somebody do that again. Or if it's a relational thing, you say, okay, this thing went bad with this person, how can I trust the next person? And so the way we get through this is you have to start looking at what actually happened and are there signs, symptoms, or evidences that you can now, looking in 2020 hindsight, and realize these are things that were happening that could have given me maybe a clue that this was the problem. And then you look at the new situation you're in or the new person you're interacting with and saying, is this person anything like that? Okay, even though I'm interacting in a similar relational thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say you had, this happens on a very common basis, you had a bad marriage, maybe an abusive marriage, okay? So now, I don't care if you're the man or the woman, you're now considering getting married again, or at least getting in a relationship again, but you have trouble trusting that it won't go the same way. But it's a different person, okay? And so you have to say, okay, what kinds of things would I see that would be evidence that this really is similar to the other person? Because if you can't get to a place where you trust them and also trusting you in picking and that kind of thing, you're going to be in a real big problem. You're going to be basically neutered in your ability to move forward in any way. You're going to be cut off your ability to move forward in any way. All right? So it's about looking at the situation and going, well, you know what? Some things about this feel similar, but are they really similar? Well, it is. Let's say you're the woman, because I'm talking to you. Let's say you're the woman, and you had a relationship with a man, and it went badly in whatever which way, or the person did something that breached your trust. And now you want to be in a relationship with a man, a new relationship, and you're nervous that he's going to breach your trust. But is there any evidence of that? Is there anything about this that, you know, what feels similar is that it's a relationship with a man, right? So that part's similar. You had a relationship before and you were married and it went badly, and now you're getting into a new relationship and you're thinking it's going to go the same way. Well, it might and it might not, but can there be first evidence of it, or else you'll never get in a relationship and it will never work. Okay, you have to get to that place where you can trust. That doesn't mean the trust might not be breached again. But having your trust breached again is still better than never trusting. Because if you never trust, you'll never have what you want. Do you understand? So you have to understand that to go into situations, there's always a risk of it going badly. But there's also a potential that it goes well. Okay? Now some things are more predictable. There are things that when you look back at it, you go, well, actually, now that I look at how I went about this, yeah, it's not that surprising that it went badly. And you can see where there was mistakes or errors of judgment or some other thing that happened that led to the problem. That now if you make different choices, you probably won't have the same problem, okay? Other times, you couldn't see it coming, and you know what, in the future, you still might not see it coming. But that also means that you'll never give yourself the opportunity, if you're not willing to try, to have the success. And so it's not a forgiveness thing, it's a different peripheral problem from a trauma, okay? It's another residual trauma challenge that comes from trauma, okay? The trust issues, but it's not a forgiveness problem, okay? It's not a forgiveness problem, but it comes out of, it's a trauma response.
Yeah. My other part on that was, especially for myself, I tend to overthink everything. So looking back on past situations and trying to analyze them, it gets a bit difficult because I'm looking at everything from every possible angle. And then sometimes, especially if I continuously do it, I notice things that were there that I didn't notice before. And at some point, it almost self-sabotages you in doing that. So would it be better to go to somebody when I feel like I'm getting a bit overwhelmed on trying to figure things out so I don't put myself in that position where I kind of become stagnant
All right, listen.
in
okay?
moving forward?
Okay. First of all, thinking is good. Overthinking never goes well.
Yeah.
Okay? A lot of you can relate to this. All you blues especially, okay? Now, red sometimes underthink. Yellows often are not even thinking. Okay? You know. So, but overthinking's a problem, okay? Overthinking is a problem. Because when you overthink, you're also having paralysis by analysis. So you're making your ability to move forward very challenged. And also when you overthink, you do tend to see things that aren't even there, okay? Because of this mode, we'll call it a mode of overthinking, when you're in that mode, okay? So that's where, yes, you would want somebody that you can counsel with, whether it's a friend or an actual counseling person, to be able to help you sort through when you're overthinking. Excuse me. Now, for example, I don't name names, but I have a couple of people that call me for counseling who will ask the question, am I overthinking this? Okay? Or I'll stop them and say, hold on, you're overthinking this. Okay, you've taken this way over there, okay? It's a lot simpler than you've made it, all right? So it helps to have somebody that can kind of pull you back to the middle when you've gone way off into overthinking land, okay? Because I'm telling you, nothing good comes out of that. Actually, often nothing comes out of that because you're too busy overthinking, okay? So you're just sitting there overthinking and not doing anything, all right? So until you can self-regulate, which means I want you to become an expert in your problem. I tell this to everybody when they have a problem. Go find books, videos, YouTube broadcasts, whatever, TED Talk, something about overthinking, and learn how to manage that mode that you go into so that you can catch yourself and self-regulate. But until you can, get help when you think you may be falling into that trap, which almost always has got two symptoms, okay? I'm just pulling this out as I'm making, the statement. So one symptom would be of overthinking is being immobilized in that situation. So not being able to make a decision, okay? Overthinking immobilizes your decision-making process, okay? And number two, okay, overthinking is gonna spin you into, some sort of a self-critical sort of place. All right, because that's one of the byproducts of overthinking is figuring out at some point how to blame yourself and make it your fault and beat yourself up. Okay, so when you're thinking about something and you've turned it into you, when it doesn't necessarily need to be there, because if it's you should be able to figure that out pretty quickly, all right? But if you overthink, everything eventually turns into, it's me, it's my fault, I'm no good, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, I'm not worthy of this, I'm not worthy of that. I mean, it's just gonna be a complete self-beat up. Okay, to whatever degree, all right? But I said, so you got two symptoms to look for. Are you turning whatever happened into beating yourself up, or are you turning whatever happened into a frozen from being able to make a decision? Okay, then you need counsel. You need to have somebody you can talk to unfreeze yourself and stop you from beating yourself up when maybe that's not what you need. Because I don't want you to ever beat yourself up. I mean, if you're wrong, I want you to recognize that and own it, but don't beat yourself up about it, okay? Did that help?
Yes, thank you so much.